Everybody here today. We're going to be having a little pre-Shabbat overview of the Torah reading and a little bit of getting us prepared for this week's for Shabbat. So first of all, I want to wish everybody a good Shabbos, and it's good to see everybody here today. This week is a double Torah reading of Parshas Bahar and Bichu Kosai. We'll have a quick overview of what this week's Torah reading is about, and then some good thoughts. I'm wishing everybody a good Shabbos. Also, just a quick reminder, on Sunday, we have a pause for prayer. That's jewishally.com/pause. Everybody praying together for those that need a special speedy recovery. If there's anybody that you want to put in for a Misha Berach, you can go online now on jewishally.com/pause and insert their name for a Misha Berach. That's 12 p.m. on Sunday. jewishally.com/pause. So, this week's Torah reading begins with the Torah telling us about Bahar. This first Torah reading tells us many different mitzvahs. It tells us the mitzvah of the sabbatical year, the mitzvah of the Jubilee year. It tells us the mitzvah pertaining how we have to help another when times are not that great for the individual, as well as the Torah tells us about the laws of being honest, not cheating another person. The Torah then goes on into the second Torah reading, which is the last Torah reading of the book of Leviticus, which is called Bichu Kosai. And God tells the Jewish people that should they follow its statutes, then we know that God will give us what we need and give us the rain in time and the different blessings that God promises the Jewish people for following the observances of the Torah and the mitzvot. That this week's Torah reading has in it, as well in the book of Leviticus, many of the consequences of, for God forbid, not following the Torah reading, not following the precepts of the Torah. And it concludes with ending the book of Leviticus. But one of the interesting, we'll stop on a few of the things that are mentioned in this week's Torah reading. And a very unique concept, which is in this week's Torah reading, when it comes to the laws pertaining to the sabbatical year. When it tells us about the sabbatical year, the Torah tells us that a person must not work with his land the 7th year, and only afterwards, on the 8th year, can they start working with the land again. When it comes to Jubilee year, the Torah tells us one cannot work with the land the 7th year, then on the 8th year as well, because of the Jubilee year. And over here, the Torah says an interesting point, and probably the only place in the Torah where it has this type of wording. And the Torah says, and you may ask, what am I going to eat for 3 years? You should know that God will then give you his blessings for those years as well. Never in the Torah does it give a person a doubt in his mind. If God says to keep a commandment, why would you ask, what am I supposed to do? God said you got to do it. Tough luck. Tough it out. But over here, the Torah says, no. You may ask, what am I going to do? How am I going to survive? How am I going to live? And the Torah says, no. Don't you worry. I will give you the blessing that you will have in that 3rd year. In that 6th year, you'll have enough for all the years to come. What's the Torah really telling us here? And over here, the Torah is telling us an interesting concept. Every single time the Torah tells us to do something, we have a method of how it can be done. Meaning, God gives us a commandment, and within nature, there's a way that we can make sure that it happens. Within nature, there's a method of how God wants the blessing to happen. Over here, God is telling us a certain mitzvah, which is the sabbatical year, which is counterproductive to what nature demands it should be. Nature demands that we have to work with the field in order for it to grow. That means if we want to follow what God's teachings are concerning the land, we should be working with it. Not working with the land can maybe even become bal tashchis. You're ruining the land, desecrating it, laying it folly. How can one expect to have God's blessings if he's making it lay folly? Over here, God comes along and says, no. Generally, I tell you to make a blessing within nature to be able to get the blessing and the miracle of God. Over here, God tells us it's going to be such a miracle which is so beyond nature that you won't even need to make the vessel. Not only that, the vessel that you think you're going to make is going to be counterproductive to what the blessing is that I want you to achieve. And therefore you may ask, and this is the words of the Torah, how is the blessing going to come if I'm going to be counterproductive to making that vessel? Therefore God comes along and says, no, vitzivisi es berchasi. I will command my blessing. Not I will give my blessing. I will command my blessing. Meaning that blessing is going to come because of, notwithstanding, that you going against the concepts of nature. Over the years, we have seen this, that Jewish people throughout the ages, that even though they've given their life to things which seemingly, let's say it was for the observance of Shabbos, seemingly that was the best day of the week for business, but when they closed their store on Shabbos, and which was seemingly against achieving the blessing and making the vessel, God gave them that blessing, and they were able to see even better and stronger than before. The same thing is also in our life. There are many times in life that we ask ourselves the question, how am I supposed to be able to achieve God's blessings? I have to do different things which may be maneuvering to make that special vessel. Therefore, God says no. If God tells us to do a mitzvah, following the mitzvah to what God told us to do automatically creates the blessing and achieves that blessing that God intends for us to have. The Torah then goes a step further. Another point in this week's Torah reading. Concerning the laws of interest. The laws of interest, the Torah tells you that when your brother may be a little deficient and he needs some funds and you should loan him money, make sure not to charge him interest, and he's not allowed to pay interest. According to Jewish law, one Jew to another Jew is not allowed to charge interest. Not only that, the Torah considers a person who charges interest that won't have a portion in the world to come. What's so significant about it? And if you look when the Torah tells us about the laws of interest, the laws that tell us, the Torah uses the terminology your brother. When your brother's deficient, when your brother's poor, don't cheat your brother. Because the Torah over here is telling us that when we do a mitzvah, it shouldn't be any fringe benefits to it. When you give somebody a loan, do it for the sake of actually helping them, not because you're going to get a gain or a benefit from it. What is truly helping your brother? When you're doing it out of an altruistic perspective, not when you can gain something in the back end of it. Which brings us to the second Torah reading. The second Torah reading, the Torah begins with the words, Im bechukotai telechu, if you will go in my statutes. As you know, there are three different types of mitzvahs. There's a mitzvah which is called edus, testimony. For example, a mitzvah which we do that we commemorate an event that happened in previous times. For example, Passover, Shabbos, Sukkot, all the holidays, they're called edus. They're testimony to a certain event that happened historically for Jewish people. Then there's mishpatim, which are laws which, as the sages put it, if God forbid the Torah hasn't been given, we would still have to keep those laws, because these are laws that are self-evident for humanity to be able to survive. And then there are chukim, laws which, without the Torah telling me, I wouldn't keep them. And the only reason why I keep them is because God tells me that I should keep them. In the words of the sages, chuka chakakti, I've made a decree, and you have to keep it. There's no rationale to it. This week's Torah reading begins that God tells us, Im bechukotai telechu, if you will go in my statutes. The ones that are commemorative, I understand you'll observe. The ones that are self-evident, I understand you're going to keep. It is those mitzvahs which are supra-rational, which the question is, will you or won't you? And therefore the Torah begins, Im, please. God begs with us, please keep these commandments as well. Now what's the next verse? That God says, should you follow these commandments, telechu, you will then go. Over here, the Hasidic masters tell us something very interesting. Generally, if a person enjoys a certain concept, a certain ideology, a certain intellectual concept, they will grow with it, they will talk about it, they will live with it, it will energize them, and so on. But if I don't understand something, I just do it dry. I'm told to do it, so you do it. You got to take out the garbage, so you take it out. Do you enjoy it? Are you motivated? Are you excited to do it? Are you enthusiastic to do it? Yes and no. Over here, the Torah tells us, bichukotai, in those laws that are statutes, which seemingly you don't understand their reason. Over here, the Torah comes along and says, you know what? Do them with just the same excitement. It is that mitzvah which is telechu, which will propel you to be able to escalate in your levels of observance and connectivity to God. And why is that? And here comes the first Chabad Rebbe with an unbelievable explanation. He says, you ever notice there's two ways how you can give a message across? Either by writing it. So therefore you have two separate pieces. You have the parchment and you have the ink. But you can always take the ink and rub it off. and the ink is separate from the parchment. They're two separate entities, but to be able to convey the message, they're made as one. But then there's something called engraving. When you chisel out a message into a stone, there's no way that you can ever remove that message from the stone. The message becomes part and parcel with the stone. The same idea is with a mitzvah. If I do a mitzvah because I appreciate it, because I like it, because it makes sense to me, I enjoy it, I like eating matzah, I like observing Shabbos, that's wonderful that you're doing the mitzvah and you enjoy it. But it's like ink on top of parchment. Two separate entities. God said one thing. You happen to enjoy the thing that God said, so therefore a great match. Everything works out. But when it comes to a mitzvah of chukim, a mitzvah of statutes, where you're not doing it because you enjoy it, you're not doing it because you found some rationale of why it has to be done. You're doing it simply for the reason because God commanded you to do it. As a decree of God, you now become engraved with the word of God. You and God become one entity. And this is what propels you and cultivates that relationship that you have with God. It is this Torah reading that begins with the words Bechukotai, following God's statutes, because it's super rational, that we read about the consequences that happen to Jewish people for not observing the mitzvahs. Because when we do something because it's rational or not, then I have a rationale. Today I'm going to do it, tomorrow I'm not. But if my relationship with God is something which is super rational, beyond intellect, beyond understanding, it's because me and God are one entity, then I constantly climb in my relationship because it's not dependent on anything. With this, the Torah reading concludes the Torah of the book of Leviticus. The book of Leviticus, which tells us all the different laws about sacrifices, laws of purity and impurity, laws which are irrational to a certain extent, laws which we can't make a sense of. Because the Torah comes along and says, yes, following these laws, though I do or don't understand them, connects me with God in a super rational way. Our relationship with God becomes super rational, and God reciprocates in kind and gives us a super rational ability to be able to motivate us and continue doing what we're doing and giving us blessings beyond our ability. What this teaches us as we conclude the Torah reading, and every time we conclude a Torah, we wish each other, Chazak, Chazak, v'nis chazek. My blessing to you all, especially at this time, is Chazak, Chazak. Be strong, but how are we strong is only a v'nis chazek if we strengthen each other. By being strong together, we each become collectively stronger, and we all become strong together. So I want to wish you all and take this opportunity to wish you chazak, chazak, v'nis chazek. Be strong, and let us all be strong together and get through these trying and turbulent times, because we know that we are connected and engraved, as we mentioned in this week's Torah reading. Us and God are one unit, one entity. There are things that are happening around us that are super rational. We have no understanding in them. But we know that God has a deeper message, giving us a connectivity, a way that we can relate and be strong and stand strong together. We'll come out of this stronger than ever before, and wishing you all a good Shabbos, a wonderful Shabbos, a healthy Shabbos. Looking forward to celebrating together in person very soon. God bless you and have a great Shabbos. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comments box.